Let's learn about an informative speech, how to select topics, and how do we actually inform in a speech. So what is an informative speech? Basically, you are trying to communicate knowledge and new information. It is a neutral speech. We are not picking sides. We are not arguing. We are not saying that this is good, bad, right, or wrong. We're just providing information. We're enlightening our audience. We're not advocating. We're going to look at our audience and try to make information usable, make it interesting to your specific audience. So that you take the information that you've gathered in your audience analysis, and how do you make it relevant to your audience? Our class is a group of young adults who are here to learn new things. And you've gotten to know each other a little bit in the discussion board and your groups. And so you have enough information to get started, but you do need to tell us in your speech, why should we care about your topic? Why should we listen to it? How am I going to benefit as an audience member by hearing your speech? And we'll talk about how to do that in another week or so. But we want to be thinking about that as we're selecting a topic. How do I make it relevant to my audience? Let's look at some of the informative categories or types of informative presentations. There's a whole list of them, and I've narrowed it down a bit. Our parameters are we're doing nouns, people, places, objects, and phenomena, or a more of a how-to, a process, but it's not a demonstration speech. This is not a time for a half-hour cooking show. You only have 4 to 5 minutes. So our processes would be very abbreviated. I get excited about topics, and so I'll try to be brief, but I want you to think about things that are of interest to you. I have a whole section posted in our folder asking you questions. What do you know about? What are you interested in? What would you like to know more about? Like, I think the aurora borealis and the northern lights is fascinating phenomena. That's a great topic for me. I think it's amazing. And so you think through things that you're knowledgeable about, you're interested in, and stem from that. It makes it easier, right? So think about some of those things. But let's talk about some of these categories and see if you might start generating some ideas. I love objects. Right? Because I think there's so many things that we use every day or we see every day, and we really don't know that much about them. Like, why do Post-it notes only temporarily stick? I can't explain that to you. That would be informative, right? What does caffeine do to your body? It helps keep you alert. It can dehydrate you. That would be informative, right? What do you know about sandwiches? We probably all like to eat them. Right? What do we know about them? Well, we know what it is and we know how we make it. So those on the surface aren't good, but if we start asking other questions or approach that topic from a little bit different angle, it becomes more interesting. Like, when was it discovered? When did they first start sandwiches? Who invented it? What are some of the different types of sandwiches worldwide? Because they are not all the same. That would be really informative. So sometimes you could take something very simple and just look at it from a different angle. How to make a sandwich would be appropriate for a kindergarten class, not a college young adult class, right? So find things that you want to learn more about, right? Erasable ink. I don't know how that works. That would be a great topic. Objects, so they can be really fun. People. It can be about a specific individual or a collective group of people. We are fascinated with royalty and celebrities, and that's okay. Don't forget athletes as well. Don't forget you need to persuade us of why we need to learn about that person. I would suggest that unless you want to do historical, I would avoid politicians. Right now, it's such a heated topic, and it is hard to remain neutral. I think we want to be more fun, lighthearted anyway. So if you were doing something historically, that would probably be okay. Otherwise, I would probably avoid politicians. Events can be a thing, and so that would be something that could be possible to do. And then your processes, that's a how-to. But because this isn't a demonstration speech, it would be simple processes, right? Or things that are more verbal, like how to put together an outfit, how to prepare for a job interview, how to tip, how to maybe pack a bag or a suitcase. That doesn't involve a whole lot of doing. It's relatively simple. And so a process or a how-to is okay as long as it's minimal. While issues are technically under the informative category, we are not doing issues because those tend to be persuasive in nature and you like to take them persuasive. So we're not doing issues. I would be leery of concepts because sometimes theories are a concept and that could be a thing. Right? But sometimes when we get into philosophies and ideologies, then we start going persuasive. So unless there's something really practical that we can learn, I'd probably, again, avoid those two aspects. But I want you to be interested. I want you to have fun. What kind of genres of music do you like? What types of television, movies, shows do you like? If you like watching Home and Garden Channel, do something like that. If you're into the history type channels, do something with history, right? Find things that you know or interested in that will make your speech easier to present. I'm just going to run through this portion really quickly. You get the details in this chapter, but when it comes to informing, we're conveying information. We're not arguing. We're not creating persuasive arguments. So we are working on informing. And so how do we do that? Obviously, you're going to gather your research, but these are the things that you'll do in your speech. There are these 4 basic categories. Let's look at each one of them really quickly. Definitions. Sometimes we need to define vocabulary. Remember jargon back from our language chapter. When you're teaching us new things, you may not know some of the vocabulary. Okay, somebody might not know if you're doing something that has to do with music, they may not know what melody is. You may have to define it. So defining things are part of informing. But you don't want to have too many new definitions. We might be overwhelmed if you introduce us to a lot of vocabulary. Descriptions are also part of informing. When you can provide us with details that paint a picture, those are very helpful. That vividness will help us understand what you're saying. Demonstrations. Again, these would be the short, really brief demonstration, not the whole speech, but how something works. Like a yoga pose, that would be a demonstration that's short that would work. Explanation, explaining the reason or the causes or what does that mean, is informative. So for example, if we were to talk about coffee, if you spill coffee on your carpet, you can clean that up, no problem. Or if you spill wine on your carpet, that can come up. If you spill decaffeinated coffee on your carpet or Kool-Aid, it will not come up. It will stain. Why? Because when coffee is decaffeinated, it takes the color out. So there's actually dye put back into the coffee. And so decaffeinated coffee spilled on the carpet is really dye, just like Kool-Aid is. So you can't get that out of your carpet. I just gave you an explanation of why you can't get decaffeinated coffee out of a carpet. Who knew? That's informative. Answering that question, who knew, is informative. When we are talking about informative, we want to make sure that we are clear in giving information and we want to try to make it memorable. And so you want to try to simplify your ideas. You want to try to spread your information out. Don't make it too heavy in one section and really light in another section. If you can relate new information to old using analogies or comparisons, you'll learn about that in another session coming up soon. You want to be redundant. We're going to learn this when we talk about organizing. It is good to be redundant. You feel awkward and robotic, but it's necessary. We won't get it. Redundancy is good. And you want to think about how adults learn. And that's presented in this chapter as well. We want to keep reinforcing the key ideas, and we'll learn how to do that when we get to our organizing and our outlining section. We want to try to make it interesting. So we want to relate the information to our audience's interest. We want to try to use attention-getting material, find things that grab our attention, get us curious. You are going to establish a reason to listen. We will explain that in more detail in our upcoming sessions. We like word pictures. Again, painting those pictures, that helps us. Also, finding interesting images and visuals to use. That draws the audience in. And you certainly can use humor. I have slides on each one of these issues. You can check these out and look at the more specifics, tips on how to use word pictures. You're going to have just a little bit here on visuals, but we will have a whole section on how to create your visuals, your PowerPoints. And you're finding tips in how to use humor. You don't have to be a very funny person. This is not a comedy act. And if you're not comfortable using humor, don't use it. But we can be a little bit more lighthearted, but appropriate. We want to keep our humor PG, please. And then there's tips on how adults like to learn. They like information that they can use immediately or right away. We want to make it relevant to their needs, simplify their lives if possible, right? They like to be involved in the learning process. We like to draw them in. And we like to try to connect life experiences with the new information to make it relevant. So that's a synopsis of how to inform and a little bit on informative topics. Be sure to email me your topic for approval.